what are the benefits for the world in cloning?
To highlight the type of society that we want to build, which is
What are UFOs? Why do they come here? What do they want with us?
it's the other version where you have creationist by God, and God made everything, and then again you're not responsible for anything because
Why are Raelians so into cloning?
the Pope is against it.
The potential of eternal life is huge, isn't it?
We are also in charge of our future, an eternal future if we want it.
Do you want to die? I mean, do you want to die? If you're healthy and well and having a wonderful life, do you actually want to die? Welcome, world, and welcome once again to the Raelian View, which is a place where we discuss some very interesting subjects and the Raelian view on those subjects, whether they be human cloning or sex or the world, infinity, you name it. We'll talk about anything. So again, we are incredibly fortunate to have with us Brigitte Boisselier, who is a leading
Hello,
light
everyone.
in the Raelian movement. Hey, Brigitte.
Hi.
How you
Happy to be
doing?
with you
See
again.
you. It's always good to see you. Just from the last conversation we had lots of questions, and I thought we could begin just by sort of quick firing through some of those questions, just to see if there's anything that we want to maybe discuss today.
Mhm.
So the first one is it's quite contentious. Is have you noticed that many of the Raelian ideals are shared ideals with the current totalitarian globalist organizations, the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization, that are hated amongst younger people? What are your thoughts? So, do we have
Mhm.
any thoughts on that? Do you have any? Do you?
Yeah. Well, I see that point in the sense that when we say we want to have a global government, right? Then because we believe that yes, ultimately we don't need separation between borders, and we should not have different currencies and all that, and we should not have any currency actually. So in our approach, if we look carefully at the way we look at things, we're pretty libertarian. We don't want government at all, but we believe that at one point we'll have to go through a united government so that there's less war, and that everyone, depending on wherever you're born, you have access to the same technology. So it's really based on making sure that human beings, no matter where they live, where they were born, have access to absolutely everything in the same way. Meaning, we should be able to all have food, have a roof, access to internet, access to education, anything. That's what we call the paradigm, like really having the all the robots, artificial intelligence, AI, at the service of all human beings. So that's what is behind our global vision of the world, that is directed not by totalitarian people who are looking about how they can be in power, but by people who are selected
Yeah.
because they are the best at managing, problems. So that's what we call also the geniocracy. We should have a podcast just about that.
Yes.
So
Maybe
yeah,
we should.
but basically, it's like saying you cannot direct a country or the world, or even a small city, just by saying that you're best at doing it, because that's what they do. People who are elected now are the one who are just saying, I'm the best and I can do this, and they never do it, and they try to stay reelected and all that. So selecting, and in that sense, AI will help us to select the people who have that type of mind, who can actually solve problems. So,
Mm,
and they will be different depending on the problem, depending on the region.
yeah.
Solutions will not be the same, but they will be directed by the same deep will to have every human being taken care of and
Mm.
respected in their desire and in their needs and their wants. And that should be what dictate the future of our society. So it's a full development in that. But that's my first answer. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, we want it to be global, and but gearing towards the the people happiness. It's actually driven by people happiness and people pleasure and the
Yes.
respect of life. Yeah.
Yes. Totally. I think what's really interesting about the question, um, is that globalist organizations, yeah, the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization, sure they are, but I think it shows great intelligence to borrow good ideas, and a good idea is a good idea, and and those organizations, they're not the first organizations to say one world government would be better to benefit society on the west of the planet with the benefits that society on the east have developed, and the philosophy of those on the north, that everybody should share the benefits of a society of on a global scale. I'm totally for that. I have a deep mistrust for authority, a deep mistrust for many, many reasons that I won't bore you with right now. I have a deep mistrust for the medical profession. I have a deep mistrust for governments, and I think anybody who has a desperate need to lead and be in charge, I have a concern about. So, I mean, the World Economic Forum, particularly, totally, they're not. Nobody voted for them, and they're dictating to the entire world, what should be happening on the pandemic treaty that they're attempting to force through many governments, and and they've tried to influence governments with their young leaders of the world, program, and they've got many leaders now in major positions around the world that are pushing forward the World Economic Forum's ideas. I think that's something that we should all be concerned about. So I share that the concern of the question, but a good idea is a good idea, and I think if it's the people I don't trust. It's people who have a need, a wish, and a will to elevate themselves and to control others. And I do, my personal view is I feel that, rightly or wrongly, I feel that from those two organizations particularly. But it is true that they have. I mean, they're from the late 60s, I think, the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, when they set up. So they slightly predate the Raelian message, but lots of the ideas that they've got now, like many philosophers on TikTok and YouTube, and they've cherry picked from the message. I think lots of them have read the philosophy of the Raelian movement, and they're putting it out as their own. And I think there's that can be said a little bit about the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization, amongst others. So that was from Dex, who labels himself as a human. It doesn't say where he's from, etc. So hopefully we've covered that. That's question number one. This one I think will be very good for you. I don't necessarily have a clear view on this myself, and that is: can scientists be creationists? How can scientists not believe in evolution? And that's from English Hayes from Bicester it
Hmm.
says Buckinghamshire, but that's Bicester's Oxfordshire, I think.
Yeah. Well, you in theory, you cannot be a scientist and believe in creationists, because you have to accept that what your peers have been demonstrating, that
Mm,
we have evolved through billions of years. But if you look at it closely, we have evidence of these evolutions by steps, like, so there will be the proof that, I mean, the evidence that before there was anything crawling on Earth, there were life inside the ocean, right? And they will have, but there's a misstep, which is how did those swimming thing started to
mm,
crawl, right? So they have evidence, or maybe there's a little arm growing here, or something like that. And they say, well, that's sufficient evidence. We lost the intermediate part, and maybe one day we'll find a fossil showing that there
Mm.
was intermediate, but they didn't survive, and then we have that step, and it's accepted that way. What I say is that there is another explanation. Yes, anything that was swimming was there before anything that was crawling on Earth,
Yeah.
but it's just a different step in the creation. So if you imagine scientists with the knowledge on how to create different species, and they start by populating the ocean with all kind of different planktons, and then they go into more elaborate fish or sea.
Yeah, mammals and
I mean, mammal,
yeah,
yeah. So
whales, dolphin.
all these things, and feeding on the planktons and feeding on each other and all that. So it's already a huge ecosystem that you have
Yeah.
to create. And then the next step, you go into creating something that goes on Earth, and then will feed on the grass, and then you create that grass and all that. So for me, with the knowledge we have now on how to create new species, because we did create new species,
Mm.
we can mutate if we want to. We have done all kind of chimera as well. So
Wow.
we know how to do that. Although we prevent ourselves to do it, and it's probably safe at this time to not go too fast in that direction.
Mm.
But we
Yeah.
can see, we know that we can create new species. We can create even a cell. Fully artificial with the
Wow.
DNA fully synthetic.
Wow.
That was done by Craig Venter in 2006. So when we see that,
Gosh. Wow.
we understand that the science is there. I mean, maybe we just need another 20, 30 years and we'll be able to do exactly that, create that. We won't have yet the knowledge of an ecosystem, and that has to
Mm.
be created step by step. But that's why, as a scientist, I don't feel at odd, or I don't feel that I am being completely dumb saying that, yeah, we can explain all these amazing steps that are today interpreted as evolution by having scientists directing that evolution
Mm.
behind their computer or whatever form of AI they had at the time that
Mm.
helped them, to create that. That's what I see over thousands of years, and
Mm.
we have evidence. I had. I'm passionate about also ancient astronauts and all the mythologies and all that. And I was reading more about Amaterasu, who is at the origin of the Shinto uh,
Uh-huh.
cult, right?
Yeah.
And Amaterasu is known as a goddess who came from from the stars, and she was the eighth generation of goddess when she came, or god and goddess. So there have been eighth generation before her coming there. So she was in charge of creating, according to the Shinto myth, she was there to create the people of these islands of Japan.
Mm.
And she was the daughter of someone called Izanagi or whatever, and who created the terraforming. Who did all the
Ah, okay.
terraforming when he
Yeah.
arrived. So that is part of the Shinto,
Mm.
philosophy, and
Wow.
so there are accounts in all around the world of stories about people
Mm.
who came from the stars and who had generation after generation of them working, I mean, having
Yeah.
fun on the earth that was just an ocean first. So they
Mm.
lifted the earth, I mean, some continent, and then they planted things
Yeah.
in there and then created everything.
Mm.
So I think we have evidence from the past, or stories from the past, and more evidence of the science of today that
Yeah.
comfort the fact that we can be creationists without shame.
Yes, because I think also the Mahabharata, which
Yeah,
I'm probably
yeah,
not pronouncing it correctly, but is that the Indian myth
yeah.
poems based in people coming from another planet? I'm told, and but regarding terraforming and creating an ecosystem, I know they've had the Eden project in Cornwall, I think it is in England, where they've had in a biosphere, basically in a dome, a fully contained ecosystem. They've been working on it and tweaking it for
Yeah.
decades to try and make
Mm-hmm.
sure it's self-sustaining, etc. So we have been working on that
Mm-hmm.
for many, many, many years, and I
Mm-hmm.
just think it like there is no difference to me. I mean, obviously, I'm not a scientist, but there is no difference to me in my mind of random chance events that Darwin says, and it's a random chance events that come together and eliminate and don't eliminate and choose for a positive development. That is a version of evolution, but so is sitting at a drawing board and writing an idea down and then experimenting and trying to make that happen and then developing it again to the next stage and then the next stage and then the next stage. That's the same sort of evolution. So if you're an evolutionist, there's very little difference in my understanding, my mind. There's very little difference between a Darwinian evolution and a scientific one, in the sense that it would happen stage by stage by stage by stage. As some, you can't build a house by starting with the roof. You start with the foundations, and it strikes me it would be the same in science. And I would imagine, because people believe, I think, my understanding of when I've watched interviews on this sort of stuff, that when you say I'm a creationist, they immediately believe that that's a non-scientific idea. Whereas in my mind, if I, as a human scientist, wanted to create something, I would start by creating it. If many of us gathered together and we went to another planet and started to create something scientifically, that's a scientific endeavor. It's a human, scientific, uh, artistic endeavor. And that is evolution, a human driven evolution, not a random chance happening of an ethereal, you know, force that doesn't exist. The human side of it makes a lot of sense to me, that because I can make something myself. I can start with a piece of wood and I can build you a house. Ultimately, I can. So with lots of other bits that come along, but that is a human driven goal. And the idea of building that particular thing or whatever it is, or writing a song or putting a play together, it starts with an idea and it develops and it evolves. And so for me, evolution and science are kind of the same thing. I don't agree with Darwinism because it just strikes me as it doesn't make much sense. It really truly doesn't, especially when, I watched a couple of lectures from Harvard Medical School that were online a few years ago, and they were talking about, that they'd abandoned Darwinian evolution. They were talking about it as a foundation course only, as this is where the idea of evolution started. And now they were saying they focus more on random chance linear evolution or something like that. Random. I'll have a look and find out exactly what it's called. It's called random chance linear evolution, which basically means that if I was to go to a sunny country, I go brown. They're saying that's not adaptation. That is, I'm evolving into a darker skinned person. And then when I go back to a northern climate, I go white again. I'm not, reverting back. I am evolving back into a pale skinned person
Or you just have a
for
different, or your body is just preparing the melatonin as it was,
yeah,
as it was
exactly.
scheduled from the start. Yeah,
Exactly. Then that's
yeah.
this
But
human program. That's what
yeah,
makes sense to me, is that
it's
that's
exactly,
programmed.
yeah. But it's
Yeah.
also the number of mutations that you need from one species to the next. It's
Mm.
not just one or two; it's thousands of different
Yeah.
genes that are changed,
Mm.
or really like that new ones that appear, some that are gone, and all.
Mm.
So to explain that. Especially when we talk about entropy, so you can have all kind of different positive mutation and one negative one that will cancel all the other one before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Despite that, we have the billions of different entities that we
Mm.
see around us, so
Yeah.
we've been pretty much protected, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I-
So
I-
anyway.
And I did a lot of reading of Dr. Michael Behe, who did something called Darwin's Black Box, was his book, and he he's basically anti-evolution. He's an evolutionary biologist who became against evolution altogether, and was banned from speaking in universities. He was from Baylor University, and his book's incredibly interesting. And he was saying that that for example, for something to be selected for in evolution requires an intelligence anyway, because you have to say, is this useful to me? Is this useful to me? Is this? There has to be a question. It seemed. I mean, I'm a non-scientist, so again, it's difficult. It's a hard concept to get my head around. But I just don't accept Darwinian evolution at all. I mean, I've always
Mhm.
struggled with that, just as a random chance thing, events. But it's certainly a very interesting question. We could spend
Yeah,
hours and hours and hours on it.
there's something that we have to add when we talk about evolution, and the Darwinistic way to look at it is that it makes it okay to be in competition because it's the survival of the fittest, right? So
Right.
we are in that. We have admitted and we are taught very early that there is a competition going on, and then you have to be strong, you have to be the best, you have to be, because it's an ongoing competition
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, that made you survive or that made you exist, and therefore
Mm,
you have to perpetuate it, and
mm,
that is terrible.
yeah.
So I think it legitimizes a society that is based on fighting each other, and then
Mm,
so of course there's the other version where you have the creationist by God, and God made everything, and then again you're not responsible for anything because that's the God who did that, right? and
yeah.
then
Yeah. That's
and
right.
then all you have to do is to behave so that you have eternal life, otherwise it's like it's not better. So
Yeah.
having that philosophy where we are creationists, but the scientific creationists, where we okay, they created us so that we are happy, but now we are in charge of our own life, and
Yeah.
it changes completely how you live your life and how you interact with other people, and especially in terms of competition. You realize that survival is made by cooperation and love
Yeah.
between each other and respect of life. Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm,
Yes.
mhm,
Nicely said. Nicely
mhm.
said. Okay. Let's. I'm just going to move on to. I'm just going to skip a couple of questions because they're quite complicated. So this is the one I think I think it'd be interesting and to focus on a little bit today, which is why are Raelians so into cloning? Because we're always asked, why are you always talking about cloning? Why are you talking about cloning? It's really most other people keep asking us about cloning is the truth of that. But if you let me uh, just run a few things by you first before I throw it over to you. I just think that the best way to answer that question is to possibly start at the very very beginning of the Raelian message, really, the message being the message that was given to Rael for humanity to ponder over, to learn about, and to accept or reject from the Elohim, those who the Raelian believed created all life on this planet. And that is found, and it's free to download for anybody. You can download it from rael.org. That's rael.org online, and the book's free, and it's called Intelligent Design. And it has I mean, one of the many things, when I first discovered that book, I discovered it in a bookshop. I was just wandering, I was rehearsing for Saturday Night Fever, and I wandered up Oxford Street and just grabbed a book in a bookshop. And there was one thing I loved about it. One thing I loved about it, which is probably the most lowbrow, I have to say, because there's so many huge ideas in the book. But the lowbrow thing that really gave me a sense of satisfaction was the fact that the book itself answered my 12-year-old boy questions. So many 12-year-old boy questions I still had going around in my head, which the first one being obviously, is, most young boys, is what are UFOs? Why do they come here? What do they want with us? What are they? Where, who would be interested in this? And I immediately started to research and found some incredible images supplied by NASA um, on their Soho satellite, which they photographed what they initially was released as UFO pictures from one. I think so. Satellite is focused on the sun, monitoring the sun's health and sunspots, etc., for various reasons, and all of these artifacts, they call them, appeared on the on the photographs that they were taking. So they analyzed the photographs with something called EDICS, which is electronic digital image comparison system. And what they do is they turn up contrast and each color in the spectrum, or each part of the spectrum, they turn it up 99 points and then they turn it down 99 points. And they do it on every aspect of the spectrum, ultraviolet and everything. And if the image is in every single one percentage increment or deficit in the image, they can then say that it's a solid object. So I'll show in some photographs of the images, and they're quite compelling as UFOs. But that journey was the book that led me to discover those things, and other things like the burning bush, in the Bible. How on earth can Moses be in front of a bush that burns? It's so beautifully explained in the message right at the beginning. Right at the beginning, just explained that if I was to go to the Amazon jungle basically and shine a torch into a bush, and the bush then is glowing, because of my ignorance of never seeing technology, I would think the only way I could describe it is the bush was burning, but it wasn't consumed. And which I thought was a wonderful explanation. The wandering star of the nativity, that a UFO was guiding, trying to draw attention to their prophet that was there, which again, Jesus being a prophet of the Elohim initially, and Maitreya being the final prophet of those previous prophets. But the one that brings us, of my 12-year-old boy question, that brings us to the first mention of cloning in the Raelian book is Noah's Ark, and I guess it is the first time that it's referred to in the Raelian book, and it's one of those things. Is how on earth could, if one believes in creationism and you believe the book and you believe, you have to, there's a whole other things you have to accept before you even get to Noah's Ark, but that's how could it be possible that the animals went in 2 by 2, these hundreds of millions of species of animals. They also kept all of the water for them to drink whilst they were, whatever, 150 days in the in the ark. And what would they do with their waste? Where would the hundreds of tons of food for these animals? And the Raelian explanation of that blew me away. It blew when I first read that. It blew me away. And like, just read this. In the book, it says on page 20 of Intelligent Design, it says, Elohim asked Noah to build a spaceship which would orbit the Earth during the cataclysm, containing a pair of each species that was to be preserved. So that's the, Noah and his ark, and that he had to gather them together. But the Raelian, as I said, the Raelian view of that is that it was one cell from each species, because there's enough genetic information inside a single cell of your body, my body, a dog, a cat, an elephant, or humpback whale, to completely recreate that being. Completely, just one cell would be all one would need in order to do that. So it explains that. But again, something else that the book said, before we come back to the cloning aspect of it, it says in Genesis 7 verse 17, it says the ark was lifted above the earth, not on the water. So that's the actual original scroll says the ark was lifted above the earth, not on the water, which again falls into line with the fact that it could potentially be a spaceship. Obviously, as a Raelian, I accept fully that the Elohim created, and they gave Noah and helped him create a spaceship that floated up and saved it. I accept that, but I'm kind of trying to talk to people who, this is a new idea. The Elohim could create a spaceship and take a single cell from each species and put that cell into a
Just freeze them.
yeah, freeze them into a test tube or whatever, into
Uh,
into a lab, and you could feasibly, I guess, I don't know how many, you know, what they call test tubes it would take or whatever, but I would imagine that I could get a million of those in the space that only one elephant would take up. So I would think that. It says here, a single living cell of each species, male and female, is all that is required to recreate a whole being. The first living cells of a fetus already possess all of the information needed to create a human being, right down to the color of its eyes and hair. So there is the entrance to cloning for the Raelian movement. So my question to you, Bridget, because we've talked about cloning so many times, just in Raelian interviews, and we're always talking about that we do it. But for you and for the Raelian movement, what are the benefits? What are the benefits for the world? Not just Raelians, and because it's part of our message and part of our philosophy, but what are the benefits for the world in cloning? And you're probably the best person to ask about this
Yeah, yeah.
because
No,
you've done it.
it's a huge question. But I will answer first. The first question you
Yeah,
had is like, why are Raelians so adamant
into cloning.
you have to do that? And it crossed my mind. Rael would say because the Pope is against it.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Right.
So that's an inside story, but it's true that
Yeah.
the whole world was against it, and
Mm,
we know how important it is. So let's go, and that's why we went into it. But
mm,
why is it so important? It's like in the same way that I was saying earlier that we've been created and we are in charge of our own future, our own happiness, and then we need to organize our life that way. We are also in charge of our future and eternal future if we want it.
yeah.
And that's of course the question. Some people don't want to live forever. I think it's a pretty cool thing if we can do it, and
Yes.
I'm fully into it.
Can I just
And
say, I just remember one time Rael was being interviewed on British TV, and one of the who's a very popular TV journalist was interviewing Rael, and he had like he was very put out by some things that Rael had said, and he says, "Well, why do you want to live forever? Why do you want to live? Why would you want to do that? You'd be old and decrepit. Why would you want to live forever?" And Rael said to him, he says, I want to live forever. Don't you want to live forever?" He went, "No," and he went, "So die." Die.
exactly,
Just feel
exactly.
free to
You
die.
don't have to.
No, you don't have to live forever. You just die.
Yeah,
But the thing is, do you want to die? I mean, do you want to die? If you're healthy and well and having a wonderful life, do you actually want to die? I mean, I don't want to die.
yeah,
Even when I'm having a hard time and a bad day, I don't want to die.
yeah,
So
yeah.
like cloning, yes, towards the potential of eternal life is huge. I interrupted you, sorry, Bridget, but it,
No,
it
no,
just
no,
it,
no. I
it
mean,
reminded me that Maitreya said that
and
on
we can
TV.
talk. Why is it that people don't want to die?
Mm,
Don't want to die, and that it
yeah.
feels that it's normal to live. I mean, I remember touring in 2003, 4, 5. I was invited in university and talking with young
Mm,
students and explaining that yeah, we want to live forever, and they were why is that? They were like in their 20s or teens even,
mm,
and they were saying, why do you want to live forever? So they were already taught that it's normal to die, it's normal to suffer, and it's normal to have no
mm,
pleasure, and that you can maybe have some success and you have to perform, and that's the perspective of life that the majority of the people have. So
mm,
the vision we have is as Raelians is very different. We're here to have pleasure every moment of our life,
mm,
to do exactly what we want to do, and that the whole society should be built around that, but also that we can actually expand that life forever if we want to, and that was
mm.
explained in the book Intelligent Design.
Yes, wonderful.
Actually, the human beings, the aliens who created us, uh, have the capacity to live several lives if they want to. I mean,
Mm,
not everyone is recreated. I understand that they have some criteria for that,
mm,
but but it is essential if we want to live forever.
Yes, I mean, I
So
think also there's been lots of people have said it to me too. But it's selfish to want to live forever. In some way that a future generation who hasn't been conceived of yet has more rights to the future than I do.
yeah,
I just don't see that. Yeah,
assuming that the new generation will be better, and
yeah,
that
it
we have
makes
to
huge
create that
assumptions.
new
Yeah,
generation, and which is, I mean, it's a mistake because they have to relearn everything. So they are
yeah,
born, and again, they have to relearn everything. So if you imagine a brain that's at 80, 90, that is fully capable of doing something that to have the same strength as the one that they had at
mm,
30, for example, they can keep creating, but with all the knowledge and the wisdom they have acquired for the past 90 years.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so we would go so much faster in everything.
Yes, yes.
Obviously, people who are 18, 19 now don't have the energy to create anymore. So they just survive, so they take care of themselves. They don't
Mm,
take care of society. But if you have that capacity for hundreds of years to,
mm,
to keep creating with the knowledge that you acquire through those years, we would go so much faster. And
yes.
it is actually said in the book that
Mm,
the, the they tweaked our DNA so that we don't live longer than 120 years, while
yes.
before the first creation of human beings on Earth, they were living between 700 and 1,000 years, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Methuselah and
Mm,
all these old people. Anyway, uh, that the knowledge that we can live forever and create forever is not something that is. I mean, back 20 years ago, it was like you're crazy. The
yeah.
longevity program was really like the minimum. It was just a few individuals thinking that way, and
Mm,
Aubrey de Grey was one of them. He was pretty active at that
mm,
time, and now he's a guru of his kind, and there is a huge longevity community, and there
yeah.
are billions to are put into on finding out how you can live longer and
Yes.
healthier as you age. There is
Yes.
even that. I mean, I don't know if you follow those, but Brian Johnson, who is an influencer from America, he just wrote a book called "Don't Die," and he created what he calls the blueprint, what you have to eat, what you have to do to actually
Okay.
never die. And
Yes,
if for
yes.
sure within 15, 20 years we'll have the technologies available so that we don't die at
Yeah,
100.
and it's
Yeah, yeah.
it
So it was, I
degrade.
mean, yeah, it was really visionary of Rael
Mm,
to explain all that in around 2000, 2005, between 2000 2005, and when he wrote his book Human Cloning, where he talks about all these aspects. It
mm.
was exactly the moment to bring it, and then that longevity community spread
Yeah.
and thrives now. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just come back to the something you said? Something I think I said it actually, which was people say, "Oh, it's selfish," and you to want to live on after fairly healthy lifespan, and you mentioned the fact that if we could live longer, society would move forward a lot faster because you get to the point where you know what you need to know in order to be a use to society. You can, like, whether it be a scientist, you've got the background knowledge of your chosen field to now really put it into practice, and your body's already degraded far, potentially far too far to be of use for any particular length of time. But I don't think that the two generations or the next generation down the line has more of a right to the future than I do, because it's not about age. It's about, in my understanding, it's about an open mind. An open mind can learn. A closed mind can come in a 17-year-old, an indoctrinated closed mind. All you have to do is look out through history and some of the things that youth have done and been involved in because of the indoctrination of parents. Whether it be the Hitler Youth or there are many examples of tyrannical younger groups, terrorist groups, etc. Indoctrination of older people, it's the open mind that's important. And you can have an open mind at 100 years old. If you're open and eager to learn and open to new ideas, then we can push society forward. It's the closed mind and the already decided on every particular issue which is why I love podcasts. I love podcasts and I love discussion. Like, there's no taboo subjects for me. I'll talk about anything, whether it be something that's considered as not, Raelians, we don't think or do this. I love to talk about these things because for me, that's the only way to stay balanced, is to not be afraid to go the other way and then to come back and go this way and learn and balance ourselves and not be indoctrinated. I don't want to be indoctrinated. I want to keep an open mind always, because then I don't see that we're any use to anyone the moment we shut our minds down in a creative sense. Like I was looking, just to move on, I was looking what other benefits of human cloning are there, and I just thought I'd throw a couple at you. See if there's anything that struck a chord and you wanted to talk about. For example, there would be no murder victims if one could clone. And obviously, it's important to say about cloning that there are several stages of it. There's the ability to clone a person and their body, for example, and they'd be born again and grow as a complete individual, just with the same genetic makeup of the cell donor, the clone donor. And there's another version of that where one can transfer memory and personality from the dead or dying person into the newly cloned and accelerated to an adult size, using, I don't know, growth hormones or whatever. I don't know, because I'm not a scientist, as I keep saying, into another body, which I've read quite a bit about. So on that aspect of cloning, where you could create, for example, if someone had been murdered, you could clone their body and then transfer their memory and personality. Because I've talked there's a scientist, a doctor in the Raelian movement called Dr. Marcus Wenner, who is a neurobiologist, and he's worked in memory transfer and various aspects of this science around the world. He's a very, I know you know Marcus very well, Bridget, yeah, and he's a friend of mine. He's a very, very bright guy, and it is a possibility to transfer the memory and personality from my brain, because that's where my entire being is housed, and transfer that into a new body of me if I was to be murdered. And Marcus has spoken in great detail of how that is potentially one day will be possible, and in which case, when we get to that stage, there'll be no murder victims, no victims of terrorism. Biological robots could gain as much pleasure from sweeping the floor and doing the dishes as we, would get from a sexual encounter or having a night evening with friends, or regardless. Potentially the same type of biological robots for sex partners, which will help the mental health of so many people who are alone, who are sexually frustrated. And I'm not afraid to talk about sex. I know people have said, "Oh, sex cult," and that's a nonsense. I think it's important to talk about. We're grown-ups, we're adults, and sex is a hugely healthy and important part of our lives, our psychology. So, and there are many people, I'm sure many of them are men, but I'm sure many of them also are women, who are lonely, wanting some physical contact with some sort of sex partner. Biological robots could fulfill that need. Eternal life that we've spoken to. Uh, Cloning the best food, for example, the best cows, the best for steaks, and medical cloning. Cloning, heart, lungs for people who are damaged. But I guess when cloning gets to the ultimate level, I wouldn't have thought you'd bother cloning a heart for someone who has a heart disease. You'd give them a whole new body.
It's almost successful now. That we can definitely clone and create a heart cell out of an embryonic cells that we have cloned from skin cells, for example. But they are working now on the growth in a scaffold so that it goes into the full shape of it. So
Wow, yeah.
I think it's not that far. It's not that
Wow,
far.
that's interesting. You
Yeah,
get,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
but there are
But
many benefits to cloning, many benefits, and we don't really talk about them. They're not really spoken about in society because
yeah,
cloning has been a taboo subject by institutes, governments, etc. And it's been almost ridiculed at times, even though it's a hugely powerful avenue of science, which I have no ability in whatsoever. But I know it's something that you have
but even the
investigated.
ultimate one, that is the one where we grow, instead of having a baby clone,
Yeah.
you clone a full adult body.
Mm,
There are some studies that are made right now, not by us, but
mm,
some people are trying to have a full goat coming
yeah.
in a machine and all that. So it's the accelerated growth should be possible, and the transfer of personality into a computer and therefore possibly into a new body later on is also studied. I think it's mainly developed in Russia at the moment.
Mhm, mm.
But there are lots of money put by some private individuals who want to live forever in a computer, and
Yes,
like
yes.
so you can just map your brain and transfer that, and
Mm.
then the computers are not big enough yet, but
Yeah.
it's coming there. Mhm.
Ironically, that is something that I heard one guy at the World Economic Forum talking about, that we would all live in computers at some point after death, which again is interesting. I, I want a body, but then again, how would I know? I guess if I'm in a computer, I would this could be a computer. For all. Do you see what I mean? If it's a really good program, would I know I'm in a computer, or would it be the Matrix? That whole thing that everyone talks about. Are we in the Matrix? There's so many people talk about this stuff online. I do find it fascinating, but ultimately, Bridget, where do we want cloning to go? Where do we want human cloning to take us? What vision of society? You mentioned paradism. Um,
Yes. Mm.
what vision of society? How would that benefit people? I'm not talking about benefiting big business or government. I'm talking about just the basic people. How would we benefit, us ordinary folk,
Yeah.
from those
Yeah, I
cloning?
think really like the focus was on human cloning to highlight the type of society that we want to build, which is really focused on, and that's what I was saying before, on the respect of life and the happiness of each individual, and the respect of their needs and wants.
Mm, yeah.
And that should be fulfilled. So, cloning is just the aspect at the end of life that we can perpetuate it, and
Mm,
that's great. But we have a big work to do before, so that the full life is actually pleasurable. Because I
mm.
would understand people who are saying, I don't want to live forever, if you live a miserable life.
Yeah.
Right?
Stress,
So,
debt.
and stress,
Yeah.
but it's these the need for the basics, but also the emotional stress that people are living in, and then from an early age, where they have to perform at school, they have to stop playing, and then they have to perform. They have to get a job, and then suddenly they have a family, and they have to sustain for their family.
Mm,
They find money and feed, and
mm,
it's an endless struggle. It should not be. The society that we want to build is a society where no one struggles. And
mm.
we were laughing before starting about laziness. We
Yeah. Yeah.
because I forget to be lazy sometimes,
Mm,
but it's because I enjoy what I'm doing. But
yeah.
we should have the possibility to be lazy if we want to,
Yeah. Of
and that
course.
should not affect our capacity to eat or to have a
Yeah.
roof. And so it organized the society, and right now we have all the tools and all the power to
Mm,
make sure that no one is starving and everybody has a roof. We should be
mm.
able to do that. The wealth of the world is such that no one should starve.
No.
And there are also already some countries who are giving the minimum to live. Right, I think Switzerland has that now,
Mm.
so it is doable. It
Yes.
has to be a society project. It has to be implemented, but for that you need to change the perception and the system of elections and put the people there. But we have the tools, especially with now with AI and the
Mm.
way it's developing. I think now it's a matter of society decision, and that's why we have to be vocal, right?
Yes, and I think also it is a huge restructuring. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. It's a huge restructuring, and
Mhm.
and which personally I'm totally up for. I'm totally up for restructuring society, and because I mean, as a 15-year-old kid, I remember having this conversation at school with a teacher, social studies or whatever the subject was, and saying that what is truly is the need for money, because if everybody agreed to do what they do for no money, everybody could have whatever they want for no money, because it's only the lack of money that stops me going and buying good food, or the lack of money, or that stops me having a nice holiday or a nice break, or or a nice car or a nice push bike or something. It's often a lack of money. But if we all agreed, like for example, I would happily. I mean, I'm a theatre actor, so it doesn't exactly have a seismic shift in society if I say I'll work for free as long as I can go and have something to eat after. The basics I need for life are also free. But I've been paid a lot of money at times for my work in multi-million-dollar shows and films, etc. And I mean, films to a far lesser degree than theatre. I've been far more successful in theatre, but I happily would have done all of that for nothing if society didn't pay for it. I still would have done it, and I would imagine that if we do replace car manufacturing with robots. I know it's not necessarily AI; they're programmed robots that manufacture cars, etc. But if, with the potential of everyone could have the car they want, everyone can have everything they want. It's money that's the controlling factor. So for me, it's get rid of money, get rid of the need for money, because that benefits only a very few people. The need and wish and will to keep people subjugated in order to make them earn money and pay interest on money that doesn't really exist, because it's some sort of made up banking credit that doesn't exist as money. The gold standard went years ago. It's not. It's just an idea of something that we're all struggling and paying off, and it's all our sweat equity that we're putting into everything we do. you know it's the money that's the killer, and the people who wish and continue to wish to control the world and make profit out of people for money. Get rid of money. Get rid of money. And I know it's easy to say because it's a huge restructuring, but that surely is where we have to go. We have to get rid of money, and we have to agree to either replace people with, whether it be biological robots or machinery or something, you know, to allow society to function, in order to free people up, in order for people to have a decent life and not have to work. Then everything's going to have to be free. I know it's a Star Trek ideal that you have this little box in the corner, that you just go and you press and you get what you want out of the box, and it's reconstituted matter from defecation or wherever it comes from, or the earth. But paradism is a wonderful idea, and I again, like, you call me naive. I'm Raelian, so as are you. So I have, even in darker moments, because we all have them, where we're challenged to the degree of, like, what am I going to do with this situation? We train ourselves to have a positive view on things. And my father used to say to me, if you can't have fun doing something, you're doing it wrong. You're not doing it right. You can have fun pretty much doing, not everything, but pretty much doing anything. It's a good rule of thumb to apply, that you can have fun. So I look at everything as it's possible. And if we can have an idea of something, I have an idea that all society can run without money, then I believe, because I can think it, I can therefore make it happen.
Mhm.
you know, I could make it happen if I was a wealthy landowner and I had a series house, few houses on my land, and and that they were farming, and I had a manufacturing plant for wood for them to build houses, and there was, my brother was an engineer, and I could build machine. You could make it happen on a smaller scale because people are off grid all of the time. I've lived off grid I lived off grid for 2 years, and yes, I had to go and get petrol sometimes. I did, because I used a generator sometimes, not always, but those things are possible. Even in this society, which is all money, 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 give me your money, and we're all controlled through debt and interest rates and all of that sort of stuff. I generally think it's possible, and I have a positive look on life, thinking that it is possible for this society of paradism to be created. And it's a philosophy of an attainable and sustainable paradise for all of us on Earth. And that's what paradism is. It's paradiseism, isn't it? Let's face it, it's paradiseism. It's just abbreviated. So I fully believe that it's possible for us as a society to do that, but it's a case of restructuring and
a big revolution.
a revolution. That was the next word that was about to come out of my mouth, which was, it is going to require, for as long as somebody's really holding on tight to their grip on power, on I want to lead, I want to be in charge, as people are still holding on tight to their financial dominance of the planet, then it's going to be difficult, and it's going to require some form of revolution to obviously I all hope and pray for a peaceful one, but that hasn't historically been the case always, but it certainly does. I think it will require some sort of revolution to change those things. But that's the only thing stopping us. It's the only thing. The only thing stopping us is a certain amount of huge corporations that don't want us to get rid of money, don't want us to have these. We are fully living in a controlled environment by money, and so for me, the first thing we have to do is get rid of it and
Well,
have a revolution against the people.
That's something we can develop more in our next.
Especially,
I think we're going there. It's unavoidable because the technology is there. AI is developing at a pace that is. I mean, it's fantastic what we can imagine with those. And at one point, they won't be able to keep it for their own corporation or their own use. It will have to be democratized and available for everyone, not just ChatGPT, which I love.
I've never been on there.
I can't live without ChatGPT now. My Franglish is smooth with that ChatGPT every day. But it's more than that. And as you said, we have to have an optimist view. There are people trying to stop AI because they can tell that it's going so big that it will have an impact on their powers for sure. And so they portray it as the devil, right? But AI is made by us, so it will be only at our image. And right, it's our creation. It's going to be our image, and I know that right now. I mean, the AI is developed everywhere, and at one point there will be a fusion, right? But the fastest development, I think, is in Asia, and Asian people are dictated. I mean, their philosophy is based on this Taoist and Hinduist and Buddhist, with a huge respect of life and much less competition as part of and that's why they're not invading Europe and the Christian ways. They invaded everywhere. So they have, and America is derived from Europe somehow. So they have that overpowering type of society, while Asia don't. I mean, Asian countries don't have that, and that's where AI, I believe, will be the strongest. So I'm pretty positive that we're going to have a beautiful AI respecting life and at the service of every one of us.
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. I mean, as we've said several times, I think it's our duty to have a realistic but optimistic and positive outlook on future of humanity. I think it's our duty, because it's misery and pessimism is the dominant force in most. All you got to do is look at the news. The mainstream legacy media, they call it now, don't they? That it's all about controlling people with fear, negativity, frightening people into thinking, oh, we got to stick to what the government want us to do, otherwise we're going to die, or otherwise this tyrant who's going to invade our country. And we're controlled often through fear. Just a quick one is, what do you think our first steps are to paradism? What would the first steps be realistically?
That's interesting.
Yeah. Revolution.
I believe that, yeah, the actual society is going to stumble, and that's when it's happened. But
Mm.
for that to, we have to be vocal. We have to explain. We have to show the positive of.
Yeah.
We have to place human being at the center of the decisions that are made. And
Mm.
so, yeah, we have to be more of us talking
Yes,
about it.
definitely.
That's my step, but
Yeah.
which what step it will be, we'll don't know. Hopefully, maybe the arrival also of the Elohim will be
Mm. Yes, that would be
the
an amazing.
catalyst to that. Hopefully.
That
Hmm.
would be an amazing first date. Bridget, thank
Hmm.
you very, very much. It's been lovely to talk to you once again.
Thank you, Glenn. It was fun.
Yeah, take care. Interesting subjects. Huge. We could talk about them. I could talk about them for days and days and days. So many
Yeah.
different directions to go in these things. Wonderful stuff. Okay, thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care. Bye. Bye. Bye.